Sweetie, does your mommy know you're wearing a dead man's sweater? Deborah Wilcox said it loud enough for the whole pool deck to hear. One hand on her hip, sunglasses pushed up into her bleached hair like a tiara. My son Miles was 10 years old. Standing there in a faded green cardigan he'd picked out himself from Second Chance's thrift on Route 9. And for a second he just froze. I was 20 feet away, unloading a cooler from the car, and I heard every word carry across the water. "It's called vintage, Deborah," I said, walking over. She turned to me with that smile, the one people give you right before they say something worse. "Oh, I just think it's sad," she said, loud enough for the other moms to hear. "A boy dressed like that at a neighborhood with an image to protect. Some of us actually shop for our children." I looked at my son's face. I looked at hers. And I thought, Deborah has no idea who she's talking to. My name is Elena Cho, and 3 years ago my husband Marcus and I moved into Brookhaven Estates, a tidy little subdivision outside Charlotte with manicured lawns, a community pool, and we'd soon learn, an HOA board run like a small, petty kingdom. We didn't move there for the prestige. We moved because the schools were good, the commute was reasonable, and Miles needed a quiet street to ride his bike on after a rough year. What none of our neighbors knew, because I never advertised it, was what I actually did for a living. I own Larkspur & Home, a size-inclusive clothing company I started in my apartment 11 years ago with $4,000 and a second-hand sewing machine. Today it's in over 600 stores, does about $80 million a year in revenue, and yes, I still shop thrift stores every single weekend because that's where I find my best design inspiration, and because I want my son to understand that value has nothing to do with a price tag. Marcus works in hospital administration. We're not flashy people. We drive a 7-year-old Honda. Nobody at Brookhaven knew what I did beyond something in fashion, and I preferred it that way. I wanted Miles to have friends who liked him for him, not for what his parents had. Deborah Wilcox had been HOA president for 6 years, and in that time she had built a reputation that preceded her at every mailbox and driveway in the neighborhood. She was the woman who reported a neighbor's basketball hoop for being aesthetically inconsistent. She was the woman who once left a note on the Pattersons' car because their recycling bin was visible from the street a full 2 hours before pickup. She fined a widower named Harold 3 separate times for leaving his porch light on past what she called residential curfew, a rule she had apparently invented herself. Most people just paid the fines and rolled their eyes behind her back. Nobody wanted the fight. Deborah had a way of making disagreements personal, of finding your weak spot and pressing on it in front of an audience. I'd had 2 run-ins with her myself. Once over a garden gnome she deemed not in keeping with the community's tasteful aesthetic, and once over Miles's bike being left in the driveway for, by my count, 40 minutes. Both times I'd paid the small fine and moved on because life is short and I had a company to run. But I'd never seen her turn on Miles directly. Not until that Saturday at the pool. It was the last hot weekend of September, the kind where everyone in Brookhaven shows up to the community pool at once, trying to squeeze out one more summer afternoon. Miles had begged to wear his new favorite thing, a soft, moss-green cardigan with a small hole mended at the elbow, which he'd found for $2 and insisted on wearing over his swim trunks because, in his words, "It makes me feel like a scientist." He looked adorable. He looked like himself. Deborah was holding court near the snack table with 2 other board members, Patty and a man named Glenn, who mostly just nodded at whatever Deborah said. When Miles walked past to grab a juice box, she stopped mid-sentence and looked him up and down like he'd tracked something in on his shoes. "Is that a hole?" she said, not to me, to him. "Miles, honey, we don't wear other people's old clothes here. People might think your family can't afford better." A couple of kids near the shallow end laughed, not because they understood what was happening, but because laughing is what kids do when an adult laughs first, and Patty had let out a startled little chuckle. Miles's ears went red. He looked down at the cardigan he'd been so proud of an hour earlier. That's when Deborah delivered the line about the dead man's sweater, loud enough for the whole deck. I set the cooler down and walked over. "It's called vintage, Deborah," I repeated, keeping my voice level. "He picked it out himself. He loves it." "I'm just saying," she said, arms crossed now, playing to her small audience. "There's a certain image we try to maintain here, Some families take more pride in that than others. Behind her, I saw Mrs. Okafor from 2 doors down. A woman I'd exchanged maybe 10 sentences with, visibly wince and look away, the universal neighbor sign for I am not getting involved but I see this. A teenage lifeguard named Dylan pretended very hard to be checking the chlorine levels. My son is wearing a sweater, I said. That's the whole story here. Deborah smiled that smile again. Well, I suppose not everyone was raised to understand these things. Miles tugged my hand. Mom, can we just go home? I looked down at him, 10 years old, cheeks still pink with embarrassment, and something in me went very calm and very cold at the same time. No, sweetheart, I said. We're going to stay right here and swim. I tried, for Miles's sake, to let it go that day. We stayed. We swam. Deborah kept her distance for the rest of the afternoon, apparently satisfied with the damage she'd done. But 2 days later, an official-looking envelope showed up in our mailbox. HOA letterhead. A notice of community standards violation, citing Section 14, subsection C, attire inconsistent with neighborhood image during use of shared amenities. A $50 fine. Deborah's signature at the bottom, looping and self-satisfied. I actually laughed out loud reading it. Then I got in the car and drove to her house. She answered the door already smiling, like she'd been expecting me. Like this was the whole point. Deborah, this is absurd, I said, holding up the letter. There's no dress code in our bylaws. I've read them twice. There's a general conduct clause, she said breezily. I have discretion to interpret community standards. I am the president. You're not a queen, Deborah. You're an elected volunteer position that 3 people ran for unopposed. Her smile tightened. I don't appreciate your tone, Elena. Some of us take pride in what this neighborhood represents. I'd think you, of all people working in fashion, she said the word like it tasted bad, would understand presentation matters. I do understand it, I said. That's exactly why I know a 10-year-old in a thrifted cardigan isn't a crisis. Well, I make the rules here, she said. And I'd hate for this to become a pattern with your family. We've had complaints before, the gnome, the bicycle. I stared at her. Those complaints were you. She didn't even blink. I'm simply the one who enforces the standards nobody else wants to deal with. I told her I'd be raising the fine and the whole incident at the next board meeting, in front of the other 4 members. She actually laughed. Bring whoever you want, she said. I've been running this board for 6 years. People trust my judgment. That Thursday, at the meeting, held in the clubhouse with about 15 residents in folding chairs, Deborah opened by projecting a slideshow, an actual slideshow, titled Maintaining Brookhaven's Image, which included, unbelievably, a photo of Miles from the pool that someone had clearly taken without permission, his face blurred but his cardigan circled in red. A ripple went through the room. Mr. Patterson audibly muttered, Did she just? Is that a child? Deborah, oblivious to the temperature shift, pressed on. I think we can all agree that as a community, we have a responsibility to uphold certain standards, even among our youngest residents. Deborah, said Glenn quietly, for the first time all year showing a flicker of independent thought, maybe we should just move on to the landscaping budget. She waved him off. One more slide. That's when I stood up. Actually, Deborah, I said, before you move on, I think everyone should know something. I pulled out my phone, opened my email, and turned the screen toward the room, though I was really talking to her. This is a press release my team sent out this morning, I said. Larkspur & Home is opening a design studio and distribution hub 20 minutes from here. 240 jobs. It's been in the local paper's business section since 8 a.m. Deborah blinked. I don't see what that has to do with. I'm the founder and owner of Larkspur & Home, Deborah, I said. The company you just described as something that should make me, quote, understand presentation matters. The room went very quiet. That cardigan you humiliated my son for wearing, I continued, is the exact kind of piece our design team pulls inspiration from every season. We call it character. You called it a dead man's sweater. In front of a 10-year-old. Patty's mouth had actually fallen open. Mr. Patterson was grinning like Christmas had come early. I scrolled to another tab. And this, I said, is an email from Glenn's employer, Ridgeline Logistics, congratulating them on winning our regional warehousing contract, which, as of this morning, is now on hold for internal review. Given some concerns I have about the culture here. Glenn went white. Deborah's mouth opened and closed twice before anything came out. I didn't know. That's exactly the point, I said quietly. You didn't ask. You just decided a kid's sweater was worth humiliating him over in public because you liked how it felt to be in charge of something. The board meeting minutes from that night, which someone posted in the neighborhood Facebook group along with a not very flattering photo of Deborah's slideshow, got more comments than anything in Brookhaven history, including the year a bear got into someone's trash. Within a week, 3 residents filed for Deborah's removal under the HOA's own bylaws, citing conduct unbecoming a board officer and, delightfully, misuse of a resident's photograph without consent. Miles's blurred face on that slide turned out to be a genuine privacy violation under the HOA's own document policy. One Deborah herself had written. She didn't even show up to defend herself at the vote. Patty, of all people, moved to accept her resignation effective immediately. And it passed 6-0, with Glenn abstaining out of what I assume was professional terror. Ridgeline Logistics did, in fact, quietly part ways with Glenn a month later. Not because of me, I want to be clear, I made exactly one phone call asking questions, and their own internal review did the rest. I never asked for anyone to lose a job. I asked people to answer for how they treated a child. Deborah put her house on the market in November. I heard through the grapevine, Mrs. Okafor, who I now actually am friends with, that she moved 2 towns over to an HOA-free neighborhood, which struck everyone as either extremely on-brand or a genuine moment of self-awareness, depending on who you asked. As for the cardigan, I had our design team photograph it, holes and all, and it became the mood board centerpiece for our spring found, not forgotten collection. A whole line built around second-hand inspired pieces, with a portion of proceeds going to a kids' clothing bank. Miles got to help pick the campaign name. He was understandably thrilled. I think about that pool deck a lot. Not because of what Deborah said about me. I've built a thick skin over 11 years in a brutal industry. But because of the look on my son's face when a grown woman decided his $2 sweater made him less than the other kids. Here's what I want him to remember and what I hope you take from this too. The people who mistake authority for character are usually the ones with the least of it. Real worth was never about the label. Not on your clothes and not on your front door. If you've ever had a Deborah in your life, a boss, a neighbor, an HOA tyrant with a laminated rulebook and zero self-awareness, I want to hear about it. Drop your story in the comments. And Miles says thank you for reading his sweater story all the way to the end.